Welcome to the Stylo News Intelligence Update for June 24th, 2026. I'm your anchor, bringing you this morning's executive explainer on the shifting strategic landscape in North Korea. This intelligence update is brought to you by ProWave AI, the developers behind Stylo Intel and the AI-powered open-source intelligence platform, Stylo News. Let's get right down to the facts. On today's agenda, we'll quickly cover a geospatial situation overview, the cascading regional impacts, an impartial look at the key decision makers, a reality check on public sentiment versus verified intelligence, and finally, our near-term forecast. First up, the strategic situation overview, specifically looking at recent events on the Korean Peninsula. If we look at the geopolitical map right now, it's quite clear that the past 2 weeks have been defined by heavy diplomatic and strategic maneuvering across key sectors. Interestingly enough, what we're tracking is a clear pattern of high-level political posturing rather than any actual operational military mobilization. Let's look at how this recently escalated. It really kicked off on June 7th when Pyongyang essentially locked in what they are calling an irreversible nuclear status. Right on the heels of that, Chinese President Xi Jinping visited on the 8th and 9th. Then, fast forward to the 11th, we get a joint European and South Korean denuclearization statement, which was immediately countered on the 13th by the U.S. approving a $300 million missile sale to Seoul. So the pace of diplomacy is absolutely rapid, but as we're going to see, it really does remain just that, diplomacy. Moving on to part 2, the multi-level regional impacts, or basically the cascading consequences of all this maneuvering. Breaking these impacts down, locally along the DMZ, we are expecting calibrated pressure and some periodic measured provocations. Nationally, the goals are totally distinct. Pyongyang is fundamentally prioritizing its own regime's survival and cementing its nuclear identity, while Seoul is understandably fortifying its defense posture. And internationally, North Korea is incredibly active right now, leveraging the ongoing friction between the U.S., China, and Russia to give itself a distinct strategic advantage. Okay, jumping right into Section 3, key decision makers and their strategic incentives. When we impartially examine the current power dynamics, the boundaries become pretty clear. Strategic alignment shows us that Kim Jong-un is utilizing external great power competition to completely normalize his nuclear status, and he's flat out rejecting denuclearization. On the flip side, Chinese President Xi Jinping is trying to maintain his influence over Pyongyang as regional leverage, but without fully endorsing unchecked nuclear proliferation. It's a remarkably delicate balancing act for Beijing. Looking at other external influencers, Vladimir Putin is actively deepening military ties with Pyongyang. But this is really to offset pressures from the Ukraine conflict, creating an alliance that is highly transactional rather than ideological. Conversely, former U.S. President Donald Trump has signaled he's open to considering pragmatic, step-by-step engagement measures rather than demanding immediate, complete denuclearization upfront. At the exact same time, South Korean President Lee Jae-myung is taking a notably more conciliatory approach. He is actively seeking U.S. cooperation to facilitate peace talks and diplomacy. That's a really stark contrast to the more hardline policies of the past, and it definitely adds a whole new layer of diplomatic complexity to the future of the peninsula. Next up, Section 4, Public Sentiment versus Intelligence, the Reality Gap. An essential function of open-source intelligence is separating public anxiety from tactical reality. A recent sentiment analysis of social media discourse, specifically looking at X over the last 2 weeks, reveals a highly negative and alarmist environment. A massive 72% of the discourse is driven by intense fears of global escalation and nuclear brinkmanship. Honestly, if you only looked at social media feeds, you'd probably assume a kinetic conflict was breaking out tomorrow morning. However, when we actually contrast all this public alarm about imminent war against our formal intelligence estimates, a completely different, far more stable reality emerges. There is a profound gap between what's trending online and what our satellites and ground sources are actually verifying. Crucially, intelligence consistently indicates a negative tactical warning. So what does that actually mean? It means there is absolutely no verified troop mobilization, no unusual artillery dispersal, no missile fueling activity, and definitely no civil defense evacuation measures. In short, there is zero tactical evidence to suggest an imminent, deliberate, large-scale attack on South Korea. Which brings us to our final section, forecast and actionable insights regarding the near-term trajectory. Based on the data, the most probable trajectory is a continuation of what analysts call calibrated coercion. As an informed observer, you'll want to watch for three main things: intense diplomatic rhetoric, continued and maybe even elevated cyber activity, and some carefully measured maritime or border provocations. We are looking at friction here, folks, not a general war. As our official assessment puts it quite clearly, a deliberate general war remains unlikely because the regime's primary objective remains survival. Pyongyang's preferred course remains calibrated coercion. You see, a major attack carries extreme regime survival risk against combined U.S. and South Korean forces, which makes it a highly illogical choice for Pyongyang at this juncture. So that leaves us with a rather provocative strategic question to ponder this morning. If an imminent kinetic attack isn't the actual threat, how does the global community adapt to a permanently nuclear, heavily entrenched North Korea that simply refuses to denuclearize? It's a stark reality that policymakers now have to confront head-on. For a deeper, much more comprehensive analysis of all these events, we invite you to listen to the full Stylo News Intelligence Update Morning podcast, available on your favorite audio channel. Thank you for trusting Stylo News for your calm, objective intelligence briefings today. Make sure to subscribe at stylonews.com for AI-powered news on demand. Good morning and stay informed.